I had been in the air for 16 hours when my father looked me in the eye and told me I didn't belong at my own sister's wedding. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't hesitate. He just stepped in front of the entrance, blocking the doorway like I was a stranger who had wandered into the wrong event. "Only family is allowed," he said low enough that the guests behind me wouldn't hear. Then he added almost casually, "You weren't invited." I remember the way my fingers tightened around the gift box, the way my heels sank slightly into the gravel. I remember thinking, not this time. Not like this. But I didn't say anything. I just stood there staring at the man who taught me how to salute, and realizing he had already decided I didn't exist. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old and I'm a captain in the United States Army. For the past 3 years I've been stationed overseas, first in Germany, then rotating through assignments that blurred together into long hours, strict routines, and the kind of silence you only notice when you finally come home. I don't get back often. Flights are expensive, time is limited, and when you live your life by orders and schedules, home becomes something you plan months in advance. So when my older sister Laura got engaged, I did what I always do. I made it work. I remember the call. It was late evening for me, early afternoon back in North Carolina. Laura's face filled my phone screen, smiling wide, a diamond catching the light as she held up her hand. Behind her I could see the kitchen I grew up in, same wooden cabinets, same window over the sink. My father stood in the background, arms crossed, watching. "I'm getting married," she said, almost laughing. "Can you believe it?" I told her congratulations. I meant it. I've always meant it every time she's had something good happen. That's the thing about being the reliable one. You learn early that your job isn't to compete, it's to support. A few minutes into the call, my father stepped closer, leaning into frame just enough to be seen. "We're keeping it simple," he said. "Small ceremony, nothing too complicated." I nodded. "Just tell me the date. I'll book my flight." There was a pause. Not long, just enough to notice. "Well," he said, glancing at Laura before looking back at me, "we'll see what makes sense." I didn't push. I never do. In the Army, you learn to read tone more than words. And that tone, tight controlled, told me everything I needed to know, or at least everything I should have paid attention to. 2 weeks later, he called again. This time it wasn't about the wedding itself. It was about logistics. Practical things. "Emily, I need a favor," he said, the way he always does when it's about to cost me something. The venue required a credit card on file. So did the caterer, the photographer, the florist. Laura didn't have the credit history yet, and my father, well, he said things were tied up after refinancing the house. "It's just paperwork," he added. "Your name, your card. We'll handle the payments." I sat there in my office uniform, still on, staring at the wall while he talked. I'd heard this before. Not the exact situation, but the rhythm of it. The assumption. The quiet expectation that I would say yes. "How much are we talking?" I asked. "Total comes to about $31,000, he said. "But that's not what you're paying. Just the deposit now. The rest gets settled after the event." $31,000, my name attached to it. I should have asked more questions. I should have read every contract twice, maybe 3 times. But I didn't, because this wasn't the first time my family needed something, and it wouldn't be the first time I stepped in. When I was 24, I co-signed a loan for my father's truck. It took me years to fix the damage when payments got delayed. When I was 28, I wired money home for what I was told was an emergency repair. Later found out it covered Laura's tuition gap. I never brought it up. I told myself it didn't matter. Because that's what you do, right? You take care of your family. So I said yes. I signed every contract that week. Venue, catering, flowers, photography. My name, my card, my responsibility. I told myself it was temporary. That after the wedding, everything would be squared away. Over the next few months, I watched the wedding take shape from thousands of miles away. Photos popped up online, dress fittings, cake tastings, venue tours. Laura smiling, my father standing beside her, always looking just a little too proud. There was a group chat, apparently. I found out by accident when Laura forwarded me a message that wasn't meant for me. "Vote on bridesmaid dresses," it said. I wasn't one of the options. I called her once, asked if she needed anything from me. "We're good," she said quickly. "Everything's handled." I called my father a few days later, same question. "Focus on your job," he replied. "We've got it covered here." Covered, right. I never received an invitation. Not printed, not digital, nothing formal. But I told myself that didn't mean anything. I was her sister. You don't invite your sister. She's just included. At least that's what I believed when I booked my flight. 16 hours from Frankfurt to Raleigh. One connection. A rental car waiting at the airport. I spent more than I should have, but I didn't think twice. I packed my dress carefully, a navy blue piece I'd found during a short break in Munich, and wrapped Laura's gift the night before I left. a set of kitchen knives she'd mentioned once months ago in passing. The whole trip door to door cost me just under $3,000. I remember doing the math somewhere over the Atlantic, staring at the small screen in front of me while the cabin lights dimmed. $3,000 out of pocket. $31,000 in contracts under my name. And still I felt like I was the one lucky to be there. I landed on a Friday night, checked into a small hotel about 15 minutes from the venue. The woman at the front desk smiled when I gave my name. "You here for the wedding?" she asked. "Big event this weekend." I nodded, something like that. She handed me the key, still smiling. "You must be close to the family." I paused just for a second. "Yeah," I said finally, something like that. My room was quiet. Too quiet after 16 hours of engines and announcements. I hung my dress in the closet, set the gift box on the desk, and sat on the edge of the bed staring at my phone. I texted my father, "Just checked in. What time should I be at the venue tomorrow?" He replied almost an hour later, "Ceremony at 2. That was it. No looking forward to seeing you. No come early. No, your sister would love that. Just a time. I lay back on the bed staring at the ceiling. I told myself he was busy. Weddings are stressful. People forget things. They get short, distracted. I've made excuses for them my whole life. I'm good at it. The next day, I got dressed slowly. Took my time with my hair, my makeup. There's a kind of ritual in preparing for something important, especially when you don't get many chances. I wanted to look like I belonged there, not just as a guest, but as family. The drive to the venue took me through familiar roads. Same trees, same houses, same turns I used to take before everything in my life moved somewhere else. It felt like stepping back into a version of myself I hadn't been in years. The venue came into view just before 2 p.m. A wide stretch of land-white fencing lights strung between trees. Cars lined the gravel lot. People were already gathering, adjusting ties, smoothing dresses, laughing in small groups. I parked near the back, picked up the gift box, and started walking toward the entrance. My heels pressed into the gravel with each step. I could hear music drifting from inside, something soft, almost distant. The air smelled like cut grass, and something sweet I couldn't place. I saw my father before he saw me. He was standing near the entrance, talking to someone I didn't recognize. Suit on shoulders, squared posture straight. For a moment he looked exactly the way I remembered, solid, controlled, the kind of man who never second-guessed himself. Then he looked up. Our eyes met across the distance, and in that instant something changed. He didn't smile, he didn't wave, he didn't move toward me. Instead he stepped forward, and placed himself directly in my path. I kept walking. 15 steps, 10. And then I was standing right in front of him. "Dad," I said, steady. He didn't return the greeting. He looked at the dress, the gift in my hands, then back at my face. And for a brief second, just a flicker, I thought I saw hesitation. But it disappeared almost immediately. "Emily," he said quietly, "what are you doing here?" The question landed heavier than anything else he could have said. "I'm here for Laura's wedding," I replied. "I flew in last night." He exhaled slowly, glancing past me at the guests walking up behind us. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You need to leave." I blinked, certain I'd misheard him. "What?" "This isn't the place for you," he said. "We kept things small, immediate family only." I stared at him. "I am your daughter." His jaw tightened. He didn't deny it, but he didn't confirm it either. "Emily," he said, almost impatient now, "don't make this harder than it needs to be." Behind him, the doors to the venue stood open. I could see rows of chairs, white fabric flowers arranged exactly the way I'd signed off on months earlier. "I signed every contract for this wedding," I said quietly, "every single one." "This isn't about money." "Then what is it about?" He didn't answer. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder as someone called his name from inside. Then he looked back at me, expression hardening. "Only family is allowed," he said again. And then, like it was nothing, like it didn't carry any weight at all, he added, "You weren't invited." The words didn't echo, they didn't ring out, they just settled quiet and final. I stood there holding a gift I'd chosen, carefully wearing a dress I'd packed across an ocean, realizing that I had flown 16 hours to stand outside a door I was never meant to walk through. I didn't argue with him. That's the part people don't expect when they hear this story. They expect yelling a scene, something loud enough to match the kind of humiliation that deserves it. But I've spent most of my adult life in environments where control matters more than reaction. You learn quickly that the moment you lose your composure is the moment you lose your position. So I stood there for a second longer, letting his words settle, letting the weight of them sink in without letting it show on my face. Then I nodded once, small and precise, the way I've done in briefings and debriefings and rooms where emotion has no place. "Okay," I said. Just that. No accusation, no raised voice, no question. He seemed almost relieved. Not in a warm way, not in the way someone is glad things worked out, but in the way someone relaxes when a situation doesn't escalate. Like I'd just confirmed his expectation of me that I would make this easy. That I always do. I lowered my gaze to the gift in my hands, then crouched slightly and set it down on the stone step beside the entrance. The wrapping paper was still smooth, untouched. For a moment I considered picking it back up, taking it with me, but something about leaving it there felt right. Like closing a loop I didn't fully understand yet. "It's for Laura," I said, standing back up. He gave a short nod. "I'll make sure she gets it." I didn't respond. There wasn't anything left to say. I turned and walked back the way I came, each step measured, deliberate. I could feel eyes on me, guests passing by, couples holding hands, people smiling politely without knowing what they were looking at. To them, I was just another late arrival, maybe someone confused about the venue, maybe someone who'd gotten the time wrong. No one knew I'd just been turned away from my own sister's wedding. By my father. The gravel shifted under my heels as I made my way to the car. The music from inside grew louder for a moment as the doors opened behind me, then faded again when they closed. A string quartet, I realized. Soft, practiced, precise. Everything about that day had been carefully planned. Everything except me. I reached the car, opened the door, and sat down without starting the engine. The silence inside was immediate, almost suffocating. For a few seconds, I just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, my mind did what it always does under pressure. It started organizing, cataloging, putting pieces together. It went back not in long, dramatic flashes, but in small, precise moments that suddenly felt different. The first phone call about the wedding. The hesitation when I said I'd book my flight. The way my father said, "We'll see what makes sense." At the time, I'd heard it as logistics. Now it sounded like something else entirely. A warning, maybe. Or a decision that had already been made. I thought about the contracts. 4 of them. Venue, catering, flowers, photography. All under my name. All signed in a single week between briefings and reports, squeezed into late nights when I told myself I was doing the right thing. "It's just paperwork." That's what he'd said. "It's not your money." That part too. I leaned back in the seat, closing my eyes for a second. The numbers came to me easily. They always do. Deposit paid $3,500. Remaining balance just over $31,000. Due after the event. I opened my eyes again, staring at the dashboard like it might offer a different answer if I looked long enough. $31,000. For a wedding I wasn't allowed to attend. For a family that had just told me in the clearest way possible that I wasn't part of it. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, pulling me out of the thought. For a split second, something in me expected it to be my father. Or Laura. A message, maybe. A correction. "Oh, we didn't mean it like that." It wasn't. Just a notification, social media. I ignored it, letting the screen go dark again. Instead, I reached for the ignition and started the car. The engine turned over smoothly, the sound grounding in a way I didn't expect. I pulled out of the lot slowly, careful not to rush, careful not to draw attention. In the rearview mirror, I could see the venue shrinking behind me. White fences, lights strung between trees, people moving like small figures in a scene I was no longer part of. I drove without a destination at first. Just followed the road as it curved away from the venue, past fields and houses that looked exactly the way they always had. Nothing had changed out here. The same roads, the same trees, the same quiet. Only now I felt like a visitor in a place I used to belong to. It wasn't until I reached the main road that I realized where I was going, the hotel. Back to the room I'd checked into less than 24 hours earlier, the one I'd told myself was just a temporary stop before a weekend that mattered. The drive back felt shorter, or maybe I just wasn't paying attention the same way. When I pulled into the parking lot, it was nearly empty. Of course it was. Everyone else was at the wedding. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat there for another moment, hands still on the wheel. Then finally the emotion caught up. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a quiet, steady pressure in my chest that made it harder to breathe. I got out of the car, walked inside, and nodded to the front desk as I passed. The same woman from the night before looked up, recognition flickering across her face. "Back already?" she asked, polite, casual. "Yeah," I said. "Just needed to grab something." She smiled. "Hope the wedding's going well." I held that smile for half a second longer than necessary. "It is." Then I kept walking. Inside the room, I closed the door behind me and leaned back against it, letting the quiet settle in again. The dress still hung neatly in the closet, untouched since that morning. The bed was made. Everything exactly the way I'd left it. Except me. I kicked off my heels, setting them aside, then walked to the small desk where my laptop sat. For a moment, I just stood there looking at it. Then I opened it. My inbox loaded slowly, emails stacking up the way they always do. Most of them were work updates, requests, things that would still be there when I got back. But mixed in were 4 messages I recognized immediately. Vendor confirmations. I clicked the first one. Meadow Ridge Venue, final balance due. I opened it, scanning the details. My name at the top. My card information on file. The total amount listed clearly, no ambiguity. $14,800. I opened the next one. Catering. $12,600. Then flowers. $6,200. Then photography. $4,400. Each one the same format, each one the same structure. Deposit paid. Remaining balance due within 5 business days of the event. I leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the desk, eyes moving from one number to the next. $31,000. My name. Their wedding. I sat there for a long time, not moving, not reacting, just processing. Outside, somewhere in the distance, I could hear faint music drifting through the air. The reception had probably started by now. Toasts being made, glasses clinking. My father standing up, maybe saying something about family. I wondered what he was saying. I wondered if my name came up at all. I already knew the answer. My phone buzzed again on the desk, vibrating softly against the wood. This time I picked it up. A missed call. Unknown number. Then a voicemail notification. I didn't listen to it right away. Instead, I set the phone back down and looked at the screen of my laptop again, at the 4 invoices sitting there like a quiet demand. 5 days. That's what they gave me. 5 days to pay for something I wasn't allowed to be part of. I closed the laptop slowly, the sound of it clicking shut louder than it should have been in the quiet room. Then I sat back in the chair, staring at nothing, letting one thought settle clearly in my mind for the first time since I'd walked away from that door. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't bad timing. It wasn't stress or oversight or anything temporary that could be explained away. This was a decision. And now, so was mine. I didn't leave town that night. That surprises people too. They expect me to pack up, drive straight to the airport, put as much distance as possible between me and everything that happened. But that's not how I'm wired. In the Army, you don't move until you understand the situation. You don't act until you've seen the full picture. So I stayed. I took off the dress, folded it carefully, and laid it across the bed like it still mattered. I washed my face, tied my hair back, and changed into something neutral: jeans, a plain shirt, nothing that made me stand out. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my phone again. The voicemail was still there. I pressed play. "Hey, this is Julie from Meadow Ridge Venue," the voice said, bright and professional. "Just calling to confirm a few details ahead of tonight's event. If you could give us a call back before 5, that'd be great. Thanks so much." I let the message finish, then replayed it once more. Not because I didn't understand it, but because of what it implied. They thought I was part of this. They thought I was involved, expected, present. I looked at the time. It was just after 3. The ceremony would be over by now. Guests would be moving into the reception space, finding their seats, picking up drinks, settling into the kind of comfortable rhythm that comes when everything is going according to plan. I imagined Laura at the head table, smiling, leaning into her new husband. My father nearby, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. Like this was the culmination of something he'd built. I wondered if he felt proud. I wondered if he ever felt anything else. The thought didn't sit long. I pushed it aside and stood up, reaching for my keys. If I was going to understand this fully, I needed to see it from the outside. The drive back to the venue felt different this time. Slower, more deliberate. The sun was lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the road, the kind of light that makes everything look softer than it really is. When I pulled into the lot, it was fuller than before. More cars, more movement, more noise drifting out from the building. I parked farther away this time, near the edge where the gravel gave way to grass, and turned off the engine. For a moment I just sat there again, watching. People moved in and out of the venue, laughing, holding drinks, adjusting jackets. No one looked upset. No one looked like something was missing. From the outside, it was perfect. I got out of the car and walked slowly along the perimeter, keeping my distance from the main entrance. There was a side path that curved around the building, leading toward a small open area where the windows faced the reception hall. I stopped there. Through the glass, I could see everything. Tables arranged in clean rows, white linens, candles flickering softly. A dance floor in the center, already filling with movement. The band playing something light, familiar. And at the far end, the head table. Laura sat in the middle, radiant, exactly the way she always imagined she would be. Her husband beside her, leaning in, saying something that made her laugh. My father stood just behind them, one hand resting lightly on the back of her chair, the other holding a glass. He looked comfortable. At ease in a way I'd rarely seen when it came to me. A man stepped up beside him, someone older, well-dressed, the kind of presence that carries weight without trying. They shook hands, exchanged a few words. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could read the body language. Approval, respect. The man glanced toward Laura, then back at my father, and said something that made my father smile. I shifted slightly, moving closer to the window just enough to catch the angle of their faces. Beautiful ceremony, the man said. You must be proud. My father nodded. I am. How many children do you have? The man asked, casual, conversational. There it was. A simple question. One that shouldn't have been complicated. My father didn't hesitate. Just the one, he said, gesturing toward Laura. That's my girl. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed exactly the way they were meant to. Just the one. I stood there, still, the sound of the music muffled through the glass, the light from inside casting a soft glow across the grass where I stood. For a second, my body didn't react at all. No immediate anger, no sharp pain. Just a quiet, precise shift, like something locking into place. Confirmation. That's what it felt like. Not discovery, not surprise. Just confirmation of something I'd been circling around all day without fully naming. I wasn't forgotten. I was removed. Deliberately. Systematically. And not just today. The man nodded, smiling, clearly satisfied with the answer. He said something else, something I couldn't hear, then moved on, disappearing into the crowd. My father turned back toward the table, leaning down to say something to Laura, his posture relaxed, unburdened. Like nothing had happened. Like no one was missing. I stepped back from the window slowly, the gravel crunching softly under my feet. The air outside felt cooler now, the kind of evening chill that settles in once the sun starts to drop. I wrapped my arms loosely around myself, not for warmth, but for something to anchor to. I thought about the years leading up to this. The calls that only came when something was needed. The messages that started with "can you" instead of "how are you?" The holidays spent adjusting my schedule, my life, my expectations, just to fit into a space that never quite opened for me. And through all of it, I told myself the same thing. That this is what family looks like when you're the strong one. That you give more because you can. That you show up even when it's inconvenient, even when it's uncomfortable, because that's what makes it matter. I'd built an entire version of reality around that idea. Standing there outside a window watching my father tell a stranger he only had one child, that version finally broke. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just a clean, quiet fracture. I turned and walked back toward the car. This time I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I'd seen enough. The drive to the hotel was darker now, the roads lit only by passing headlights and the occasional porch light from houses set back from the road. I drove on instinct, not really thinking about the turns, just letting the motion carry me forward. Back in the room, I didn't turn on the main light, just the small lamp near the bed enough to see without filling the space. I sat down at the desk again, opening my laptop without hesitation this time. The 4 invoices were still there. Unchanged. Waiting. I opened each one again, slower this time, reading every line carefully. Terms, conditions, payment deadlines, authorization clauses. The language was clear. The responsibility was mine. But so was the control. That part hadn't registered before, not fully. The person whose name is on the contract holds the obligation. But they also hold the authority. I leaned back in the chair, letting that settle. Authority. It's a word I understand. One I've been trained to use to respect, to operate within. In my world, authority isn't emotional. It's defined, structured, clear. You either have it, or you don't. And for the first time in this entire situation, I realized something simple. I had more of it than they did. My phone buzzed again this time, lighting up the dark room. I glanced down. My father's name. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then it stopped. A few seconds later, a message appeared. Call me, we need to talk. I stared at the words for a moment, then set the phone face down on the desk. Number. Not yet. I closed the laptop slowly, the screen going dark, and sat there in the quiet, listening to my own breathing, steady, controlled. He had made his decision at that door. Then again in that room. Now it was my turn. I didn't call him back that night. I didn't text. I didn't explain. I didn't rehearse conversations in my head the way I used to, trying to find the version of myself that would make things easier for him to understand. I brushed my teeth, set an alarm I didn't need, and lay down in a room that felt quieter than it had any right to be. Sleep came in thin layers. I woke up twice, once to the hum of the air conditioner, once to the echo of music still drifting somewhere in my memory. Each time I checked my phone out of habit. No new messages, no missed calls. By morning, the silence had settled into something else. Clarity. I made coffee in the small machine by the window and stood there while it brewed, watching the parking lot fill slowly with cars that had nothing to do with me. People checking out loading suitcases, moving on with their lives. It felt distant, like watching something through glass. My phone buzzed again just as I took the first sip. This time I answered. Emily, my father, said, his voice already tight, already carrying the edge of something he hadn't said yet. Where are you? At the hotel, I replied. My tone matched his in the way it didn't react to it. A pause, not long but noticeable. You left yesterday, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Another pause, this one longer. I could almost hear him adjusting, recalibrating. Well, he said, finally exhaling through his nose, we need to talk about something. I didn't respond. I let the silence sit between us the way I've learned to do in briefings when someone is about to get to the point. The vendors are calling, he continued. The venue, the caterer, everyone. They're saying the final balance hasn't been authorized. I took another sip of coffee, keeping my eyes on the window. That's correct, I said. You're the one on the contracts, Emily, he said, sharper now. That's your responsibility. I let a second pass before answering, not because I didn't have a response, but because I wanted him to hear the quiet in it. I'm not authorizing the payment, I said. The silence on the other end stretched longer this time. I could hear something in the background voices, maybe Laura's, maybe someone else, but it was distant, unfocused. What do you mean you're not authorizing it? He asked finally. I mean exactly that, I said. I'm not paying $31,000 for an event I wasn't allowed to attend. His breath came out sharp. Don't twist this into something it's not. That was a misunderstanding. No, I said calmly, it wasn't. Another pause, this one heavier. You showed up without confirming, he said, his voice shifting into that tone he used when he wanted something to sound reasonable. We had to make decisions quickly. It was complicated. I almost smiled at that, not because it was funny, but because of how familiar it sounded. It didn't seem complicated when you told people you only had one child, I said. The line went completely silent. For a moment I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard him breathe in. Where did you hear that, he asked. I was there, I replied, just not inside. Another silence. This one wasn't strategic, it was real. You don't understand the situation, he said after a moment, quieter now. There were expectations. Laura's husband's family. I understand perfectly, I interrupted, still calm, still controlled. You made a choice. His voice hardened again. And now you're making one that's going to cost this family a lot of money. I set the coffee cup down on the table, the ceramic making a soft sound against the wood. No, I said. I'm making a choice that reflects the one you already made. Emily, he snapped, the patience finally cracking. This isn't the time to be difficult. You signed those contracts. That's a legal obligation. He was right about that. And he knew it. What he didn't say, what he either didn't know or didn't think I'd understand, was the other half of that equation. I signed as the contract holder, I said, which means I also have the authority to approve or decline final payment. He didn't respond. So I continued. I've already contacted the vendors, I said. I informed them that I'm not authorizing any further charges. I requested that all outstanding invoices be redirected to the event hosts. You did what? His voice rose, sharp, disbelieving. I was very clear, I said. They have your contact information. They'll be reaching out directly. There was a sound on the other end, something like a chair scraping or a door closing. His breathing was louder now, less controlled. You can't just do that, he said. That's not how this works. That's exactly how it works, I replied. I'm the one on the contract. I decide what gets charged to my card. You're going to put us in a position where we have to come up with $31,000 in a matter of days, he demanded. I let that sit for a moment. Then I answered evenly. You put me in a position where I wasn't allowed through the door. Silence. You're overreacting, he said finally, but the certainty wasn't there anymore. This isn't about the wedding. This is about you holding a grudge. I shook my head slightly, even though he couldn't see it. This isn't a grudge, I said. It's a boundary. He didn't respond to that, not directly. Instead, he reached for something else. Your sister just got married, he said, his voice shifting again, softer but edged with urgency. This is supposed to be the start of her life. You're going to ruin that over. What a misunderstanding at the door. I exhaled slowly, steadying my voice even more. Laura's life didn't include me yesterday, I said. Why would it include my money today? Another pause. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. After everything I've done for you, he said, quieter, heavier, this is how you repay me. There it was. Not anger. Guilt. The oldest tool in his system. I leaned back in the chair, looking at the ceiling for a second before answering. You raised me, I said. I'm grateful for that. I let a beat pass. But you also stood in front of your daughter and told her she wasn't family, I continued. Those two things don't cancel each other out. He didn't interrupt. Didn't argue. For a moment I wondered if he was finally hearing me. Then he spoke again. You're going to regret this, he said. The words were quiet, not a threat, not quite. Just a statement. I sat there listening to the silence that followed, feeling something settle into place inside me. No, I said, I'm not. He didn't respond. A second later, the line went dead. I stared at the phone for a moment, then set it down gently on the table. No shaking hands, no racing heartbeat. Just stillness. I reached for my laptop again, opening it with the same steady motion as before. 4 emails sat in my drafts folder, already written the night before, each one addressed to a different vendor. I read through them once more. Clear. Direct. No emotion. Then I hit send. One by one. The confirmations came in quickly. Understood, request noted, records updated. Professional, efficient, final. I closed the laptop and sat there for a moment, letting the quiet fill the room again. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to happen. I didn't feel like I needed to fix anything. I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. I just felt done. I picked up my phone again, scrolled to the settings and canceled the card linked to the contracts. Requested a new one, new number, new line. Clean. When I stood up from the chair, the movement felt lighter than it should have. Not dramatic, not overwhelming. Just different. Like something I'd been carrying for years had finally shifted, not because it disappeared, but because I stopped holding it the same way. I grabbed my keys, took one last look around the room and headed for the door. There was nothing left for me here. Not in that venue. Not in that conversation. Not in the version of myself that kept saying yes when everything in me knew I should have said no. And for the first time that felt less like loss. And more like control. I didn't go back to the venue. I didn't drive past it again, didn't check social media, didn't ask anyone how the night ended. I packed my suitcase, checked out before noon, and started the drive to the airport with the same quiet focus I'd carried through the last 24 hours. On the highway, everything looked ordinary. Gas stations, billboards, the same exits I'd taken 100 times growing up. It struck me somewhere between mile markers how easily life continues around a moment that changes yours. No one else feels it, no one else stops. They just keep driving. I returned the rental car, moved through security, found my gate. The airport noise wrapped around me, announcements, footsteps, rolling luggage, blending into something steady, predictable. I sat by the window and watched planes take off one after another, each one lifting cleanly into the sky like nothing held it down. My phone stayed quiet for most of the morning. Then, just before boarding, it started. First, a text from Laura. Emily, what is going on? Dad said you're not paying the vendors. Is this some kind of mistake? I read it once, then again, looking for something specific. An acknowledgement, an apology, even a hint that she understood what happened at the door. There was nothing. Just confusion about money. I typed a reply slowly. There's no mistake. I stared at the screen for a moment, then added one more line. We can talk when you're ready to talk about what happened yesterday. I hit send. She didn't respond. Not then, not during boarding, not during takeoff. Somewhere over the Atlantic, when the cabin lights dimmed and most people settled into sleep, my phone lit up again. Messages queued up as soon as the connection flickered back. Missed calls, multiple. From my father. From Laura. And one I didn't expect. Aunt Karen. My father's sister. I hesitated for a second before pressing play on her voicemail. Emily, she said, her voice steady, familiar in a way that felt older than everything else. I heard what happened. I wasn't there, but I heard enough. I just wanted you to know that wasn't right. I closed my eyes briefly, letting that sink in. Call me when you can, she added. No pressure, just don't think you imagined it. The message ended. I sat there in the dim cabin light, listening to the low hum of the plane, feeling something shift, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough to matter. For the first time since this started, someone had said it out loud. That wasn't right. I didn't call her back immediately. I didn't call anyone. I put my phone away, leaned my head back, and let the quiet take over. The rest of the flight passed in pieces, half-sleep short stretches of thought, the occasional glance at the screen in front of me that I didn't really register. When we landed, the sky was gray, the kind of soft, overcast light that made everything feel calm, almost muted. It felt like coming back to a place that didn't ask anything from me. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone had filled again. More messages. More calls. I set my bag down by the door, took off my jacket, and walked into the kitchen without checking any of them. The space was exactly the way I'd left it, clean, quiet mine. I filled the kettle, turned it on, and stood there while it heated, watching the small movements I'd done 1,000 times before. Routine. Control. When the water boiled, I poured it into a mug, dropped in a tea bag, and carried it to the table. Only then did I sit down and pick up my phone. I started with Laura's latest message. Garrett's parents are asking questions. The venue called this morning. They said the payment was declined and redirected. Emily, this is serious. I read it slowly. Then I typed, "It is serious." I paused, then added, "So was yesterday." I sent it. A few seconds later, her reply came through. "You're making this about you." I looked at the words for a long moment. Then I set the phone down. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I realized something simple. She wasn't asking a question. She was making a decision. The same one my father had made. I picked the phone back up, opened a new message, and typed carefully. "This isn't about money. It's about being treated like family." I read it once, then hit send. That time there was no reply. Not that day. Not the next. By midweek, the calls slowed down. Not because the situation had resolved, but because the conversation had shifted away from me. The vendors had reached out. The invoices had been redirected. And now the reality of $31,000 sat where it had always belonged. With them. Aunt Karen called again on Thursday. This time I answered. We talked for nearly an hour. She didn't interrupt, didn't try to soften anything, didn't explain my father's behavior the way others might have. She just listened. When I finished, there was a pause. Then she said quietly, "You didn't do anything wrong." The words settled in a way I didn't expect. "I keep thinking I should feel worse about it," I admitted. "Why?" she asked. "Because it's my family," I said. "Because that's what I've always been told matters." She was quiet for a second. "Family matters," she said, "but so does how they treat you." I let that sit. Then I nodded even though she couldn't see me. We didn't talk about the money again after that. We didn't need to. By Friday, my father hadn't called again. Not once. No messages, no attempts to continue the argument. Just silence. The same kind of silence I'd spent years trying to fill. Only now it felt different. Not heavy. Not empty. Just quiet. A few weeks passed before I heard anything new. Not directly. Through Aunt Karen. "They're figuring it out," she said one afternoon. "Loans, payment plans. It's messy." I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. "What about you?" she asked. I looked around my apartment, the small table, the window, the space that belonged entirely to me. "I'm fine," I said. And for the first time, it wasn't something I was trying to convince myself of. It was just true. Months later, I would think back to that day at the door. The way my father stood in front of me, the way his voice didn't shake when he said I wasn't invited. For a long time, I thought that was the moment everything broke. But it wasn't. That moment didn't break anything. It revealed it. It showed me something that had been there all along, under every call, every favor, every quiet compromise I'd made without naming it. That I had been earning my place in a family that had already decided I didn't have one. And once you see something like that clearly, you can't go back to pretending you don't. I didn't lose my family that day. I lost the version of myself that believed I had to keep proving I deserved one. And what I got in return wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with applause or closure or a perfect ending. It came with something quieter. A line. Clear, steady, mine. If you've ever been in a place where you felt like you had to give more just to be seen, where you kept showing up hoping this time it would be different, I want to ask you something. At what point do you stop asking for a seat and build your own table? Tell me what you would have done. Would you have paid the $31,000, or would you have drawn the line? And if this story stayed with you, if it felt even a little familiar, take a moment to share where you're listening from. I read every comment. We're building something here, one story at a time, and I'd like you to be part of it. There's more coming. Stories about family, about boundaries, about the quiet moments that change everything. Stay with me.